Hazel Hampton, meet Mrs. Halliburton.
Hello.
She came across your father on a train.
You saw my father?
He was selling his aunt's rubber plantation in Penang?
Yes, that's him.
It's a terrible time for sailing. Did he get rid of the place?
We don't know. He's not back yet.
We arrived here 12 days ago.
But he was on the train with you.
He was put off the train at Butterworth with several others to make room for wounded soldiers. We assumed he took the next train.
No, he didn't.
The Japs have taken Butterworth, haven't they?
Yes, and I'm afraid no one will get out of there now.
I'm also his national security advisor and a special advisor to the president.
Technically, Scooter outranks any of Bush's people.
Mary Madeline will serve as counselor to the VP and assistant to Bush.
Not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Dear God.
That looks like a second plane.
Vice President, we have information that the plane's headed to the White House at this moment.
The questions you always had. The answers you were never given. The place to seek the truth. Welcome to VERITAS.
Tonight on VERITAS, our special guest is Camille Harman. Most people who search for proof that we are not alone never find it. They scan the skies, they chase lights, they wait for a sign. But some people don't have to search, because the phenomenon finds them first. And once it finds you, it doesn't let go. In 1995, shortly after arriving in Los Angeles, Camille Harman saw something in the sky that changed everything. That should have been the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The sightings became abductions. Missing hours she couldn't account for. Marks on her body she couldn't explain. And under hypnosis, memories surfaced that her conscious mind had buried. Beings that radiated light. Others that were clinical, detached, precise. And something even more disturbing. Human military personnel. Present. Participating. In operations that were never supposed to exist. She searched for answers. Roswell. The crop circles of England. 4 years. Writing for UFO magazine. She married a fellow experiencer and built a life where the phenomenon was never far from the door. Then in 2013, everything shifted again. A spiritual awakening brought her into the Catholic faith. A faith that sees non-human contact through a very different lens. And still, the sightings continued, even at her own church. But there's another layer to this story. Because while all of this was happening, Camille was building an acting career in Hollywood. She appeared in the Academy Award-winning film Vice. She worked behind the scenes, catering for industry titans. And one night, she walked into the home of Roland Emmerich, the director of Independence Day, and saw something that stopped her cold. Black and white checkerboard floors, Masonic symbolism everywhere. The man who taught the world to imagine alien invasion lived in a house covered in esoteric architecture. Today, Camille is a founding member of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. She is finishing a book about her 3 decades inside the phenomenon, and she is finally ready to tell the whole story. Tonight, she brings all of it forward. The abductions, the military operations, the Hollywood secrets, the collision of faith and contact, and the question that no one has been able to answer. Why her? And why it never stopped? Camille Harman is coming up next. Welcome to VERITAS. If this is your first time listening, welcome home. To access tonight's full interview and all of our exclusive material, simply join the VERITAS Plus family by clicking on the subscribe button at veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the VERITAS store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE. No credit card required. Also, be sure to explore our enhanced VERITAS Plus transcripts, offering full transcripts, comprehensive analysis, and exclusive insights for every episode. As a VERITAS Plus member, you'll receive a 50% discount on these enhanced transcripts. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at veritas7.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's program. Her website is CamilleJamesHarman.com, which is linked at ours as well. And directly from Los Angeles, California, I'd like to welcome my friend, Camille Harman. Hello, Camille, and welcome to Veritas finally.
Yes, Mel, I'm so excited because, we've been hooking you up with Jeff for so long, but we've all known each other forever, so this is great.
I've known you for years, even before I started Veritas. In fact, when I started going to those MUFON meetings, that's what lit my fire. I'm like, maybe I should do that. And you used to tell me that too. You should do it. And here we are. What is it? More than 20 years later?
Yes.
And by the way,
we lived in Tucson from 2005 to 2015.
Wow. And, coincidentally, I moved to California in the early 90s, but I moved to Southern California in 1995, just like you.
Oh.
In 1997, I moved to Tucson. So we had a little similar trajectory. And then you moved back to Los Angeles. But in case people don't know, I've already put a couple of clips of your amazing talent. The movie Vice, another movie from, New Orleans. How old is that movie, the other one?
Oh, the one in New Orleans. That was in the early 90s. Because I left New Orleans in 95. I was there going to the University of New Orleans getting my master's degree in acting. And the school let us work. So they said, hey, if you can book a job on a movie while you're here, you can skip class and go do that and come back and tell us about it. So I actually got that movie with Jenna Rollins and Annabeth Gish. And it was my first SAG movie. I got my SAG card for that. And it was great fun. It was a historical drama. And I got cast for my British accent by a British director. So I felt really proud of that.
You did great. Every movie I've watched of yours, you're amazing. You're very talented. But back then in 1990, when was that? Early 90s, that movie?
Yes, I think 92 or 93.
So the two of you, Annabeth Gish and you should both have been in The X-Files, not only her.
I agree. And it's weird because later on I met both Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny in separate places at separate times.
So is it true that he is the skeptic in real life and she's the kind of a believer?
That I don't know, but I did when I met him, it was at a restaurant and it was so funny because my friend was visiting from out of town and we were eating and my back was to the door and she said, there are no good guys left to marry. They're either married or gay. And then she says, now that guy's my type. And I turned and I looked and it was him. And I said, oh my God, it's David Duchovny. He's on the X-Files. And she said, huh? Because she didn't watch TV. And I got up and I said, hi, I just want to thank you. I'm a real abductee and the show really helps us. So thank you so much. And he just said, hi, I'm David. And he shook my hand. And I was really embarrassed for kind of being a bit starstruck.
Let's start with your story, Camille, because you've told me this story a few times in the past. And, I've always wondered, why haven't I interviewed Camille? And I'm glad I'm doing it now because you've done so many new things. You're involved with the, what's the name of the Hollywood Disclosure Organization?
It's Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. And we have merch.
That's right. So let's begin. When you had your first sighting in 1995, shortly after arriving in L.A., did some part of you already know that this wasn't the end of something but the beginning?
What had really been the catalyst before the sighting, I was still living in New Orleans in August of 1995. So long ago. I was still living in New Orleans with my boyfriend, and I had been compelled to buy the Whitley Strieber book, Breakthrough, which had come out that year. And I was just walking through this bookstore and I saw that big hardcover book with that alien face. And I was mesmerized and I just bought it. And I had seen the movie Communion, so I kind of knew about him. But I just thought, wow, this guy is still writing about aliens. Oh my goodness. I wonder what he thinks now. And that's why I bought it. So I read that book and then we moved to New Orleans the next month. And so I had my brain full of that book at the time I arrived in New Orleans. And then another thing that is a little interesting to me is on the way to New Orleans, when we drove with the truck and the U-Haul and the pulling of the car and the whole thing, the dog, we stopped and we camped at Oak Creek in the Sedona area. So now, because I'm always, reverse engineering events. And I'm like, I wonder if anything happened at Oak Creek. Because, it kind of matches up with what happened a few months later in LA. So we got to LA. Everything was great. I had an agent. I had a great day job. We had found this cool rental house in Silver Lake on a hill with this great view. And I remember looking at it with the landlord and Eric, my boyfriend, and saying, oh, this view is incredible for seeing UFOs. That's what I said. And, just everything going for us. My master's degree, my SAG card, blah, blah, blah. I was going to take on the town. And by November of that same year, we moved there in September. So just a few months later, I realized I had been having no menstrual cycle. And I had started having all this anxiety and just like weird paranoia and anxiety. And I couldn't attach it to anything. Then in December, we saw our first UFO together. We were walking the dog in Silver Lake, and it was daytime. And our dog was barking at this squirrel that had gone up in a palm tree with a squirrel's nest, and she was hysterical. And we were laughing and looking up at the palm tree, and there was a UFO in the sky, way, way high. And it wasn't moving, and I think it was a triangle. It was so tiny. It was so high. I couldn't really make out the shape, and it had like a shimmer around it. And we were just staring at it. I was like, what is that? And we had the palm tree for like to test if it was moving, and it wasn't moving. And we looked at each other, and he said, you and your UFO books. And I was like, shut up. And we looked back, and it was gone. And then I got really excited. I was like, oh my gosh, we were on a hill. We could see everything. It had gone nowhere, and it was just gone. And so I literally handed him the leash, and I ran home, and I reported it. And they had a UFO hotline in the phone book back then. And it was MUFON. So I called the UFO hotline and I said, oh, I just saw a UFO at Silver Lake. And this guy, Bill, said, that's great. And by the way, we have these UFO meetings every month if you want to come. And I said, oh, yes, I will be there. So I started going in, I guess it was January, the next meeting. And it all took off from there. So that was my first sighting. But it was connected to my first abduction. And do you want me to keep going?
Oh, wait a second. I didn't know about the abduction, though.
Well, the abduction happened after the sighting.
Okay.
Okay. So in December, after my UFO sighting, I woke up. I don't know if it was the same day, but it was the same time frame. I woke up in a state of sleep paralysis, which I had had very, very occasionally before in my life. However, this time I woke up in sleep paralysis. It happened twice in one night. And the first time, Eric was in the living room watching a David Lynch movie, and I was alone. And the second time it happened when he was in the bed. And what happened the first time was I woke up and I was paralyzed, and I heard an electronic sounding voice say my name from my left side, just my name, like Camille, like that. And I was terrified. I was like, what? And then at the same time, I saw a vision of a gun pointed at me. And, it was just too much. It was like I was hearing things. I was seeing things. I couldn't move. And that had never happened. I'd never had sleep paralysis with all that going on. So it went away. And then it happened again that same night. And so eventually at MUFON, I think it was maybe January or February, I saw Kim Carlsberg speak. And she had her book out, Beyond My Wildest Dreams.
Yep.
Daryl Anka had done the illustrations, and it was incredible. And it was all about her abductions. And she was in the film industry as a photographer for the Baywatch show.
She was one of the creators of Baywatch, yeah.
Yeah. And her boyfriend was a producer or director or something of Baywatch. And they lived on the ocean. So she was having these abductions and all this. And the hybrid babies, right? And I was watching her presentation, and my menstrual cycle had come back in January, by the way, before I saw her speak. So I had this period where I had no menstrual cycle for 4 months, but I never went and took a test. I didn't drive down to the drugstore and get a stupid test. I just kept waiting. Like, why would I do that? Every time in my life I'd ever been late on my period, I would just go get a stupid test and find out. And I'd never been pregnant before, but that was the routine. Like, oh my gosh, I'm a little late. Let me check. So I saw her talk, and then she had her books in the back. And I remember going to the back table and flipping through her book, and she had a checklist in the back. Like, you might have been abducted if if this, and it had a whole list of all these things. And I was like, oh my God, I have like 85% of these things on this list. And I was kind of having a panic attack. And I mean, I still remember just feeling that, this is an awakening of some kind, right? I'm putting pieces together. And I thought, I think I'm one of these people. Like, I totally think I'm one of these people. And I was introduced to Barbara Lamb that night, and I scheduled with her. I said, I would like to do a regression with you and target this night in December when I had all this weird stuff happen to me. And yeah, we need an appointment. So I scheduled my first appointment with Barbara. I think it was in April. It took a while. So maybe, I don't know. I think it was April. Anyway, I did the regression with Barbara, and I had this full on pulled out of the bed in the blue light through the ceiling, screaming, terror, teeth chattering, full on memory of the abduction. And the way I remembered it was this turquoisey blue light hit me, and it was like a column of light. It wasn't like a normal light that would spread out, it was just weird. And it curled me into a fetal position. The light did that. And then I went through the ceiling, and the next thing I knew, I didn't see a ship or anything. I just felt myself going through the house and up. And I was saying, oh, I'm going up, up. And then next thing I knew, I'm on this table flat, on some kind of table. And there's a white light all around me, a misty whiteness. And I'm in utter terror. And I'm just saying, everyone's looking at me. Everyone's looking at me. And Barbara's like, who is looking at you? And I couldn't even, she had to force me to turn my head and just look. And then I saw this row of beings to my left, and they all looked the same. And I described them as tall and thin and white with white robes, but they had the gray head, the big head with the wraparound eyes, and some kind of triangle circle emblem at their chest. And I was hysterical. And she said, what do they want? And I said, well, they were saying, relax, 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 telepathically. And she said, what do they want? And I said, I have a baby and they want it. And I was hysterical. And then my knees went apart and no one was touching my knees. And that led me to a whole other level of fear. And she said, you can go out of your body and remember this from above if you want. So I did that.
So you were pregnant?
Apparently. And so this other being I could not see, I was like forbidden from seeing that one clearly in the memory, came between my legs and I got a flash of an instrument. Just like I had gotten that flash of a gun in the paralysis, I got like a flash of a speculum type instrument. And I call it like an egg beater shape thing, like a long instrument with a basket on the end. And so this being put that in me and captured the embryo, whatever you want to call it, and took it out. And I could briefly see the little embryo in there between the slats, and it just left. And it was like a little pink skin, blob, like a walnut size or something. That's how it appeared in my memory. And I just said, you didn't even let me see it. And I was crying and I was so bereft. I just felt so horrified and traumatized and abused of my right to know what was going on and my right to my body and my right to everything, like what the hell? And that was the end of the memory. And Barbara sent me home with my little cassette tape to review it with my poor boyfriend, who had to listen to all that screaming and teeth chattering. And I mean, he looked at me like, oh my God, like this is the worst thing I've ever heard. And if it's true, it's really awful. And if it's not true, it's really awful also, because you're delusional or you're deceived or you're being tricked, or like either way, it's really bad. And I don't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do either, but it made sense with my body, And then there were more things that happened at that house in Silver Lake. And the next thing that happened was, I don't know I don't know if it was the next, but one of the other things that happened that was kind of weird now that I think back, I was sitting in the bathtub one night. I was taking a bath and there was a helicopter over our house and it was really low, like they were hunting for a burglar. And so it made me nervous enough to get out of the tub. And Eric, meanwhile, walked into the backyard to look up at it. And we heard it say on a speaker, "He's in the backyard." And I thought, oh my God, there's a burglar like in our yard. Like, Eric, get inside and shut the door, right? But then I look back and I wonder if the helicopter wasn't talking about Eric going in the backyard. But that's another story. So that happened. And then he got a job back in New Orleans. He got a job on a TV show and he left. And I was alone for a week, sleeping alone. And this was July of 1996. And I had this experience of waking up for no reason, looking at my alarm clock saying 400, my digital alarm clock. And I was like, okay, I didn't hear a noise. Nothing's happening. Why am I getting up 3 nights in a row at the same exact time? What's going on? And so I decided to go, and that morning, the third morning, I was going to go see my friend at the beach. And so I was in the tub about to shave and I had a triangle on my leg, like a fresh triangle wound, like a pinprick triangle of 3 little scabs on my leg. And I was like, damn it, that's some alien thing. I've seen that in a book or a video or something. And I found it in a video I had recorded. And I also have since met many people who've had that triangle on their bodies. So I went to see my friend and it was very strange for me to have another like physical evidence thing based on weirdness. So, but I hadn't had any sleep paralysis. So I made an appointment with Yvonne Smith for this regression, just to experiment with the other therapists in town that did this kind of work. And so I went to Yvonne and I got regressed for that one. And this time my memory was I was in the blue beam, but I went, instead of up through the ceiling, I turned and I went out the window. And I remember the feeling of going out the window like, what is happening? And this is so weird. And the feeling was like sticking your hand in a bucket of room temperature water. Like you could feel a difference, but hardly. And then I was on the table, and this time it seemed more like a room. It didn't seem as much like the mist and all that. It seemed more like a room with normal lighting and cabinets and things, counters. And there were 3 little beings around me that had wrinkly heads, and that's all I saw. They had like these gray or brown wrinkly heads, and I was repulsed by them. And one of them was, they were at 3 sides of me, like my head and this head and down there, and then one of them started stroking my head. I was cussing at them. I was saying, you make me scared of little kids because you look like little kids, but you're not little kids. And it put its hand on my forehead. It was rubbing my forehead and all my anger melted away. And that was very interesting. But then there was a tall doctor being that was a tall white gray with the wraparound eyes again and the high collar and the white robes. And I remember being fixated on its hands. To me, its hands had these long white fingers. It seemed very beautiful in my memory. But then I started panicking because it grew antenna, and I started saying it looked like a giant bug. And so it morphed.
Like a praying mantis?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a mantis or a gray because it seemed to morph. That's how I remembered it. And that being, there was like a rack above my head, like a dentist would have a light.
Right.
It was like a circular rack, and it had tips on it. And then this wand that came out of the ceiling that was on a tube of some kind. And the being, it reached up and it selected a tip and it put it on the tip of the wand, and then it just popped it in my leg real quick. So I don't know what that was. That's how that memory unfolded. So that was the beginning. Let me take a breath.
This is 1995, 96. Let me just inject a quick parenthesis while we continue with your story. But in 1994, I was living in Northern California, and I remember this. I got this urge to go to Blockbuster. For anybody who is about our age, everybody knows what that is, but that it's a species that became extinct. So I went to Blockbuster, and I had this urge to rent 2 movies. One, Fire in the Sky. The story of, of Travis Walton, and Communion. So then I went and watched them. I went to bed. I remember I slept on a waterbed. And that night, for some reason, it was super cold in Northern California, and my heater was not working. And I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning, drenched in sweat. And I looked at myself. It's almost like I was underwater, and it was not the mattress I was punctured or anything. But I thought it was strange. Temperature was about 20-some degrees outside. Inside, probably about 40, and I was drenched in sweat. But I don't remember anything. And I've never wanted to go. I know Yvonne, I know Barbara Lamb, but never wanted to access any of that at all. So I can never tell you I've been abducted or anything like that. But, the other story was I went to Sedona in 2011 for a conference that I was invited. And that night, the group invited me to somebody's house. It was Kim Carlsberg's house. She was not there, but she said, hey, come to our house, just, have some fun. And they had this game there. But before I say that, I know you know James Gilliland. I know he did a reading on you.
Yeah.
So that year, 2011, I think it was July, James said, before you leave, I want to do a reading. So he has this table that he moves back and forth. And he said, you have a higher self, guardian angel, whatever you want to call it. Her name is Nathia. And whenever you need something, just ask for it. Ask for Nathia. She's from, I think, Orion, if I believe. So fast forward to October, I go to Sedona to that party, and we're playing this game. Looked like Ouija, but it was not Ouija. So we're moving around, and then they start moving, and they said, Nathia is here. And I said, wait a second. I removed my hands, and I said, I don't want to touch it because I've heard that name before. Keep going. And I said, where have I met Nathia? And they started moving. The letters come up, and they write, you met her at the E-City Ranch. Nobody else knew but me. So when you said that you had that reading with James, I thought, and Kim Carlsberg involved. It's like 6 degrees of separation here, Camille.
It's pretty wild. And the first time I saw James speak was way back in the 90s, probably at MUFON meetings in LA. Yeah. But the reading I had with him was just recently. It was this past year.
So what did he say, if you don't mind sharing?
He said a lot. But the way it works is you fill out a form online, and he does the reading remotely. So you can ask 3 questions that have a yes or no answer. So I had asked 3 questions, and then the rest was just whatever he was going to see. So what you do is at the appointed time, you go lie down and you do a clearing on yourself for half an hour. You relax. And then he comes in with his partner. He has 2 readers, him and this woman, and they scan you and they get information about you for another half hour. And then I think that's how it goes. And then they write up a whole email about it and they send it to you. And then you read that and you're like, whoa. And then there's a phone number you call and you talk to a person that works with them about the reading. So it was kind of a weird thing because he wasn't directly speaking to me on the phone or on a Zoom call or anything, but it was very interesting. And so it showed a lot of past lives as aliens from different places, warrior type aliens in some cases. And it also, I had asked him if I was in the secret space program because I had had some dreams that made me wonder if that was a possibility. And it came back, yes. And that kind of freaked me out because that's a whole other can of worms, believe me. And it's kind of frightening, because people are being taken out over talking publicly about that kind of stuff. So, but it's very intriguing to me.
Didn't you tell me that you have a relative that worked with Werner von Braun?
Right. Well, one of the things that happens when you get abducted is you go, why me? Why did they pick me? What is it about me that makes me useful to their program? Is it my DNA? Is it my, I don't know, am I just compatible for some reason? Is it random? What is really the selection process? So you start to get a little paranoid and you just think about everything like, okay, I have A negative blood type. I'm Scottish and Irish descent, and English and French. And I'm a mutt. But, you just wonder, is it my lineage? Because in my support groups that I would go to for abduction, I would meet people of all races and religions. It wasn't exclusive to, Irish people or whatever. But I just was wondering. And then I thought, well, I hear about this biology for technology swap, right? That was made back in the day. And since my uncle was working for NASA all his life, my Uncle Jack, and he was a mechanical engineer under Werner von Braun back in the 60s. And for a while, I went to live with him when I was a toddler because I was born to a teenage mother, and I got passed around a little bit after she divorced. And so for 1 year, I went to live with my uncle and his family in Huntsville, Alabama. But it was at the height of the Apollo mission stuff, and he was very busy he was a mechanical engineer. He worked on the Saturn V and all these things under Werner von Braun and all his life until he retired. So I lived there, and I guess I don't know, I went to the doctor on the base or something. I don't know. I'm not trying to implicate my uncle in anything nefarious. I'm just saying that being in his family at that time when they were maybe trading biology for technology, I could have been put on some kind of list to be in some kind of program. I don't know. I'm just guessing. It's just a wild guess.
When you say biology for technology, are we talking about the Eisenhower meeting?
Yes. And also my cousin works for NASA. She's like one of the payload managers on the space station. So, and I asked my uncle, of course, about the aliens and all that. And he said, Camille, I don't know anything. And if it's true, it's NSA and they're never going to tell you. So you just have to get over it. So I don't know if he knew anything and he just couldn't say. That's what Chris Bledsoe said. He said, Camille, if he knows anything, he signs so many NDAs, he cannot tell you. He will go to prison. So
it's not only the NDAs, it's so compartmentalized that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Right. So he could have not known anything. But if he knew anything, he couldn't have told me. So anyway, I wonder that. And I don't know where I was going with the whole wondering thing, but.
So looking back, do you believe your 1995 sighting was a random event, or were you somehow selected before it even happened?
I think I was selected because I think it's been happening earlier in my life, and I just didn't clue into it until the biggie happened. Now, here's an interesting thing. When I met Jeff, my husband, Jeff Harman, the astrologer, we met at
a friend of this. In case people wonder, the last name Harman, we know that name. Well, Jeff is a fixture on this program.
So Jeff and I met at a gas station in Malibu. And this is really wild. So we started talking because of my bumper sticker on my car that said, I love England. And I was leaving a UFO meeting at the beach in Malibu. I was doing field investigator training where we look at things in the sky and learn what's not a UFO, like satellites and planes and all that. I ended up not becoming a field investigator, but I was trying for a while. I went to a couple of trainings. Anyway, I had to stop and get gas and then go to a rehearsal in Hollywood that night. So anyway, stopped to get gas and met Jeff. And he asked me, what part of England do you love? And I thought, Wiltshire. I was just in Wiltshire looking at crop circles. And I thought, he's not going to know what I'm talking about. And he said, oh, my friend Jim Delatoso showed me a video of UFOs making crop circles. What got you into UFOs? And I'm like, whoa, wait, you know Jim Delatoso? I was
Tucson.
I was really impressed. And, he said, what got you into UFOs? And I said, they got into me. And he said, oh, yeah, I had trouble with them growing up in Wisconsin. And so we started talking about our UFO experiences at the gas station in Malibu. And we swapped cards. And then we had a first date. And he brought his computer, as an astrologer, he brought his computer to our first date. And he typed in all my astrology data.
He wanted to see how compatible you were with them.
Yes. And he said a lot of things, but he said, okay, this time period of late 1995, when you had the abduction start and all that going on into 96, he said, you were having a Saturn return and you had progressed moon in the 12th house. And what that means is you would get a restructuring of the subconscious, like anything buried in the subconscious would come to fore. And it would mean your whole life was going to be restructured. And I was like, wow, okay, that's fascinating. So I think it was timed that I would awaken to the phenomena that probably had been in the background since childhood. That's how I see it now.
By the way, a lot of people always ask me, hey, Mel, recommend a few shows here and there. And Camille has mentioned a few of them already. Listen to the Yvonne the Yvonne Smith interview that I did many years ago that has actually recordings of some of those regressions, incredible stuff. And right at the time, Wheatley Strieber gave me an interview as well. Great stuff too. Chris Bledsoe, the first and the second interview. And what else? There's another, Kane Carlsberg, another one. Just use the search mechanism on our website and take a look. You'll love those interviews. But when did you first realize that you weren't just seeing these things, that they were talking to you or taking you actually?
Well, it wasn't until the 95 abduction that I knew it was happening. But now that I look back on my childhood, I had some red flags, okay? So there were things about my childhood health. I had extreme nosebleeds. I had to have my nose cauterized. I would wake up with blood all over the pillowcase. And I had allergies as a child, which is another thing that Whitley Strieber says is common. I don't know. I had some trauma as a child with which is what Chris Bledsoe says very often corresponds with abductions, in that I was adopted and passed around, and then I was sexually molested, things like that in my childhood. And also my fears, when I look back on it, the fears that I had as a child were paranormal fears. I wasn't afraid of people. I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid of my closet, especially I had this white wig stand, the styrofoam things.
Yep.
I had one of those on the shelf in my bedroom. I don't know why. My mom must have put it in there. And if the closet was open and I could see that white head, and I could not sleep, I had to shut the closet. And I was afraid of, I remember I saw The Exorcist when I was a kid. I was afraid of being possessed. I was terrified of being possessed after I saw that movie. I remember also I was terrified of the creature from the Black Lagoon and the Slee Stacks on the Land of the Lost, which was a total predictive programming disclosure show for children. I don't know if any of you guys grew up watching the Land of the Lost.
Everything you're saying is like I'm rewatching them in my mind.
Yes. I mean, it's about these reptilians that are highly advanced, that live underground, that have technology that involves crystals and portals and craft, these like little metal triangle things that they would appear all over the jungle. And it was a trippy show. It was about time travel. So I grew up on that. I grew up on that weird stuff. So, and vampires, I was afraid of vampires. I don't know. I just think that there are some red flags with the nosebleeds and the paranormal fears. I probably had stuff going on back then that I just don't remember. I remember I used to walk to the piano teacher's house through the woods next to my house. And one day I just wouldn't walk through the woods anymore. And I made Mom drive me to piano lessons. And it was a short walk, and it was a walk I really enjoyed. But for some reason, I got terrified by something, and I don't remember what. I don't know if I saw a snake or something else happened. But, just these are little things. I know it's not evidence. It's just interesting.
Did you have some missing time?
I don't remember having missing time. No.
Because that's something that a lot of people report.
Yeah.
So when you went under hypnosis, what came back that you weren't prepared to face?
I would say the scariest thing was not even the aliens. It was the next thing that happened. So the same time period, 1997-ish. 96, 97. I was getting all my fillings changed because I had all the mercury ones from childhood, and I wanted the pretty white ceramic ones, for acting. So I had a good dental plan through my job, and I decided to go get all that done. And I had this cute dentist in Beverly Hills, and he's still practicing. He's in Las Vegas. His name is Dr. John Roxarzadeh. And he changed all my fillings, and I love them, except one of them was hurting. And so I went back to him and I said, I love my new fillings, but this one hurts. And it's like, hot and cold and salad dressing and sugar, whatever. It just, everything bothers it. And he said, well, give it some time and come back because you don't have, the seal is good. And I don't know why it's hurting you. So give it a little longer. So I gave it a couple of months. It came back. I said, it still hurts. And he said, well, I don't know what to do. I'll just, I'll dig it out and I'll use a different brand. And I said, okay. So to preface this conversation, however, when I had started going to him, I told him I was an abductee. And I said, the reason I'm telling you this is because I read that sometimes abductees freak out in the dentist chair because it's like a flashback for them.
Right.
And I said, that's never happened to me. I've always gone to the dentist with no problem. I've had braces, everything. I've been good. But if anyone else ever freaks out in the chair, I just thought you'd like to know that. And so he said, okay, well, I read a book about Roswell. So, okay, very interesting. And he had read Philip Corso's book. So
open-minded dentist.
And I said to him, and this is really weird, because I said to him in that same earlier conversation, I said, and if you ever find anything in my body, you have to tell me. Anything weird in my body, you have to tell me. Now, why would I say that? So he digs out this new filling that he had just done, right? The one that's hurting me. And he finds this charcoal gray mass in my tooth that he's digging on and digging on. And he finally gets out a little mirror and he shows me with the mirror, like, do you see this? It's like spherical and it's charcoal gray and it's so hard I can barely drill on it. And it was not there before and it's not your old filling and I don't know what it is. What do you want me to do?
Implant.
And I said, oh my God, I said, can you get me a chunk? And he said, no, it's so hard. It's like turning into dust and I have to spray the water and it's going down the drain. And I said, well, did you get some of it out? And he said, some of it. And I said, well, just do the new filling and I'll think about it, And so we did that. And the pain stopped. It stopped hurting. So I was happy about that. And so I thought, again, with the weird thing on my body. So I go get hypnotized by Barbara for this one. And I said, Barbara, my dentist found this thing in my tooth. Let's check it out. What happened? And so she puts me under. And what's really annoying about this session was her recorder didn't work. Either she didn't press it or something happened, but the whole recording, because I have all my regressions on tape, transcribed, and I saved the recording as well. This one I have no record of, but this is what happened. So I had them in the memory I came to on the table. There was no blue light, and I felt drugged, not hyper alert and immobilized like with the aliens. I felt wide awake, but just immobilized. With this memory, I felt like drugged. And I'm looking to my left, and I'm in a normal exam room with cabinets and shelves, okay, and a door, and two guys in lab coats, two humans in lab coats, and they had khaki pants and black shiny shoes. And one of them came out, they called me a troublemaker. That's the only word I got from them. And one of them took a syringe and squirted something through my cheek in a syringe into my jaw, into my tooth.
From the outside?
Yeah, I know. That's what I remembered. And then they put me on a gurney and rolled me down the hall. And I ended up in this big hangar. And there was a helicopter in it, a black helicopter. And they put me in the black helicopter, lying down. And I remember the ceiling opened and it was super, super bright out. And we just went up and we landed in this field in Silver Lake near my house. And I've gone by there recently and it's still a field. And they landed and they said, go home and take a nap. And that's all I got from the memory. And I was so afraid from that memory, more than the aliens. When I came out, I was enraged. And Barbara said it was her first military abduction regression she had done on anyone. And I was so nervous. And then the tape didn't work. And I was like, oh my God, they're watching. I was so freaked out. And I thought, oh my God, like humans are in on this and they're kidnapping me somehow? What the hell? And I thought, if I didn't remember this and this happened, then what else has happened that I don't remember? It was the most terrifying thing to ponder because it's your own kind. It involves some scary, covert stuff, and it's medical. And I felt drugged, and it was just terrifying. That was the most terrifying regression I've had. So I don't know what to make of that. I did go to a MUFON associated doctor once through Don Waldrop back then. And he wanted me to have my whole tooth taken out for research. And I said, no, I don't want to take out my whole tooth. It's not hurting me anymore. And I don't want to do that. It's too much. So we didn't do that. You can see, and I have an x-ray that's current of it. And it does show like a little dome. You can kind of see something.
Is it emitting any electromagnetic frequencies?
I don't know. I've never had anyone test me for that. But here's an interesting story. Talking about that night you woke up hot. Okay, so I went to this party once at my friend's in LA, and she introduced me and Jeff to this guy who, his name was John Lowry. He's now deceased. But she said, oh, this is my friend John Lowry. He does some really interesting work. He clears people that have mind control programming. And I thought, oh, dude, I want to talk to you because I don't know if I'm a mind control victim or not, because that was one of the things I was considering, you know. And I have implants, all this stuff going on. And I said, I had this thing in my tooth that my dentist found, and he took part of it out, and it doesn't hurt anymore. And he said, and he looked at me, and he was like scanning me, and he said, I get that whatever's in your tooth isn't working anymore, but what have you got in your right shoulder? And I was like, oh. And then I remembered this other thing that had happened in that house in Silver Lake before I met Jeff, when I was still with my boyfriend. I woke up one morning from a dream where I was bitten by a spider, and I had this little slice on my shoulder, like a little incision, like a half an inch. And what would happen is I would have this feeling on that spot of like a bee sting, like a sharp pain, and then I would get a jolt of electricity down my arm.
Jolt. We'll talk about jolts in a few minutes. Go ahead.
And then the night, okay, so he said, I can clear that. So I went to his house and we did this clearing, and it worked. It was kind of a hypnosis type thing too. But anyway, the weird thing was the night we met him and we went home and went to bed, we woke up, Jeff and I both, in the middle of the night, burning up for no reason. Like, what is happening?
Like hot or feverish or?
Hot. Like it was hot. Like we were being baked or something. It was so scary. And I thought, are we being hit with a weapon? What? I mean, I felt like it was so scary. It wasn't the whole house. It was just, we were hot and there was no reason for it. And we were both hot. We didn't have fever. I mean, we didn't get up and take our temperature, but we weren't sick the next day. It was like a temporary condition. It was the weirdest thing. And I think it might've been because we had talked to that guy. I don't know. I'm just guessing. It was the same night. Never happened again. So that happened. Okay, so those are all my scary parts. And then I can get into the happy parts eventually, because there are happy parts to all this.
Before you get into the happy part, because I'm writing notes here, because I want people to leverage a lot of this information. Jim Dilettoso, great guy. So years ago, we went, you were there, I believe. I was invited by Bob Dean and Jim Nichols. I went with them to see Jim Dilettoso. I wanted to meet because I've heard of him for years. He looks like Einstein now. Incredible piano player. But I have a great presentation on the VERITAS TV, so go watch it. But just going back to the East City Ranch, I believe it was the second time I was there. I was in one of the cabins, and I arrived a day early, so there was nobody there. So about 1:30 in the morning, I feel this shaking, almost like an earthquake taking place. And I look at my watch, 1:30 in the morning. I jumped outside, and there was this Chinook helicopter flying very close to the ground, probably I would say 200-300 feet, 400 feet maybe, and obviously military. And somebody had this red lamp pointing at us. They had like red stuff pointing down at us. And the next morning I asked James, what's going on here? Because there's no military base close by. This is civilian area, so they shouldn't be flying over us like this. So that's another incident there. And in case people don't believe, go to the website, VERITAS TV. I filmed it. I filmed that and other things that happened there. And also, when you said the jolt, the electric jolt that you got on your shoulder. So for years, I had this jolt coming from my leg all the way to the right side of my body. So I went to one of the Phoenix conferences, UFO Congress, and met with an individual there who just recently interviewed, but I'm not going to say his name because the video was shut down by YouTube for some reason. But he was, what was the name of the doctor who passed away?
Here?
Pardon?
Dr. Roger Lear?
Roger Lear, exactly. Him and this other individual, they were doing, scanning. They did a scan on me on the above my ear, left ear, and above my right ear. The alarms were going off. But of course, I'm not touching anything in my head. But I said, what about my leg here? Point it here. And boom, 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 the alarm was going. So of course, immediately next week after I returned home, I scheduled an appointment with a dermatologist. And he said, yeah, you have something there. You put some Novocaine and I'll just remove it. So he removed it. And I said, doctor, I just want to make sure you don't throw that away. I want to know what it is. Okay, we'll keep it. So next week I come back. How's the scarring? No, nothing happening. And where's the thing? Oh, we just misplaced it. We misplaced it. And I never got the jolts again. But one thing I must say, when I was doing interviews sometimes, the jolt would happen and I would start saying things that after the interview was done, if I would listen to the interview again, I would say, wait a second, I don't know anything about that topic. There's no way I could be speaking about that with the eloquence that is happening. After that happened, it went away. So I don't know what, I can't tell you any more than that.
Wow. Well, that is fascinating. That's kind of terrifying too. But
so in your experiences, did you encounter both types? You know, the good ones, the bad ones, MILAPs. Can you differentiate them now?
Well, all I know is what I've been able to retrieve and what synchronicities have brought me and information. I'm really good at like networking with people. I'm really good at pattern recognition and seeing connections and things. And I've been blessed to have some really random times where information came my way that are they just seem like little gifts from God along the way. So one of the funny stories I tell, I was doing background work in the freezing cold for some stupid beach movie in Venice Beach, and they had us all in bikinis, and we had to wait in this RV trailer to stay out of the cold until they needed us. So it was like 20 girls in bikinis hanging out in this RV waiting on our scene. And I started talking about UFOs. I always talk about stuff. I mean, I'm just so extroverted and out of the closet. It's ridiculous. But I mentioned enough to where this one girl said, I said something about the blue beam. And she goes, I've had the blue beam. Can we go talk? And so we go down the hall in our bikinis. And she's like, I got to tell you this. And she said, I grew up in Maryland, and my dad was very high up in the NSA. And he took me camping as a little girl. And we built a fire, and we were looking up at the stars. And all of a sudden he said to me, what if I told you God was an alien and this was all just a big experiment? I was like, what? Oh my God, And it was such a random thing for somebody to drop in my mind. I mean, that's wild. So just little things like that along the way.
How do you reconcile that being a Catholic?
I don't know. I don't reconcile. I don't. I'm able to hold multiple ideas in my head at the same time and not attached to any of them. I know that being on the earth in this life is an experience of being programmed by, your world. We're all being programmed, and it's kind of like pick your programming. And so I don't know. When I went super Catholic, which I did for a while, we didn't get to that yet, but I always knew, as much as I loved it and wanted it to be totally true and wanted to do it right, I knew it was just not going to satisfy my hunger for knowledge. It did for a little while, but then it's just, life is so much bigger than one religion can really cover. And there's truth in there, but there's truth outside of it too.
You see, a common denominator. I grew up a Catholic. I went to Catholic school and all that, just like you. And I remember asking questions. And it was always the ridicule, right? But more importantly, it's almost like they shut you down by saying, those are demons. Don't talk about them. And I would say to a priest or a teacher, if God is omnipresent and you look up at the sky and millions of stars, what tells you that God didn't create any of that? Again, don't talk about this. This is demons, blah, blah, blah. And that never sat well with me.
Well, we'll get to that. I never had those challenges when I was young in school. I didn't ask those questions back then, actually. But I had amazing, wonderful experiences in Catholic school. So I can get into that. But I know what you mean. Totally. Because if they had said to me that it was that simple, that's the thing, is I'm not saying there aren't demons. I'm not saying there aren't angels. I'm not saying there aren't other beings in between somewhere. But this is when I went Catholic, and Jeff was so nervous about it, right? Being an astrologer for a living, he's like, great, they don't even allow what I do for a living. This is really fantastic.
True.
And he was worried.
Heresy.
And you're my
demons.
secretary. You're my secretary. So how is this going to work out? And I said, well, I still believe in astrology. And he's like, well, good, because, that would be challenging to stay married. And anyway, it was very hard on us because I had to make sense of all this. And
oh, wait, what brought, because you grew up kind of a secular Catholic. What brought you as a, devout Catholic?
Well, this was years later when we moved to Tucson. I was trying to go through the story linearly, but it's okay. We can hop around. So I met Jeff. We got married. We had our son. And we decided to move to Tucson. And we did it because of Hurricane Katrina, in a way. Because when Hurricane Katrina happened and destroyed New Orleans for on TV, it was so traumatizing to me. And I had already seen like the Gordon Michael Scallion maps. And I was already...
Were you living in New Orleans at the time?
Oh, well, no, when I lived in New Orleans, I love New Orleans. I'm from Louisiana. But when it happened, I was living in Beverly Hills.
Okay.
So we were watching it all happen on TV. And I was just sitting on the couch drinking red wine thinking... California's next. It's going to fall into the ocean. Really, that was my thought. So I said, Jeff, can we leave here? Can we just go live somewhere else? I'm not even acting. I'm raising a kid. Our son was like almost 3. And we decided to move to Tucson. And we used astrology to pick it. We used astrocartography to pick it.
Wow. So it picked this city.
Yeah, because, you had to look at my chart, his chart, and our son's chart and just figure out where can we all go. That's another place to live. That's nice. That isn't too far from LA because he wanted to be able to come back and forth if he wanted to. So it was a great place, and we loved living there. We had a really nice time living there for 10 years. But while I was in Tucson, I was trying to finish my book, and I got to the end of my first draft of my book. And I remember at the end thinking, this is so aggravating. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know if it's a military trick or mind control or really aliens or, I thought, am I just being deceived by something? And I just prayed and I said, God, I'm so over wondering what is going on with me. Can you just reveal to me what this is so I can get on with my life, finish this book and not lead anyone astray? And after I made that prayer, all these books started coming my way that were the argument aliens or demons theory. That's what I started reading. And they were mostly evangelicals writing these books at the time. And it was pretty convincing because they had stuff in the Bible like, one of the names of the devil was the Prince of the Air, which I thought was very interesting. And I was just really focusing on my negative experiences and just how invasive that was. And the whole breeding thing was just freaking me out. And I just basically said, God, is it that simple? Were they just demonic? And I'm like wasting my time in this subject. And it's that simple. And I had this full on born again experience, like the weeping and the contrition and this switch in my whole consciousness. I was like, you are the creator. I am the created. I don't care about all that anymore. I just want to be a good person and make you happy. And I went full on like repentant, broken down, born again person. And Jeff was like, wow, he was like, and he had predicted it in a way. He had told me, you're going to have a big spiritual awakening. And I said, oh, I have those all the time. And he said, no, something big. And then that happened. And he goes, you can love Jesus and you don't have to join a church and all that. You could do it on your own. And I was like, no, I need to be with my people. So I started going to Catholic church because that's what I knew and loved from childhood. And I got confirmed, but I got confirmed in error because actually I wasn't qualified to be confirmed. But the place I was going didn't tell me that. I found that out later. And then I started going to the Latin Mass. And
oh, wow. You went all the way.
Okay, here's how it went. I got confirmed. All right. And then I wrote a letter to the bishop and I said, thank you for confirming me, but I think I may need some more instruction because, I came from this background of all this stuff, and am I really good to go? So, kind of this long letter of weird things in my background. And then he sent me to this priest that I went to visit. And I later learned he was the exorcist for the Diocese of Tucson. And that priest knew the rules better. And he said, yes, technically you shouldn't have been confirmed because you're not in a state of grace because of your marriage, because you weren't married in the church. And he explained all this stuff to me. And I was like, dang it. And he said, you can't have communion. You can't have the sacraments. And it's like, oh man. So I was really depressed, but I kept going to mass. And he said, you can keep going to mass, but there are these nitpicky things that you got to do if you want to be in the state of grace. And I said, okay, it's your rules. I respect that. But it was hard on my marriage because Jeff felt like I was torn. And anyway, I was going to mass, and I started going to the Latin mass in Tucson at St. Gianna Oratory, which is in Holy Family Church in Tucson, downtown on University. And it's amazing and beautiful, and I highly recommend it. And so I was so in love with the Latin Mass. It was so beautiful.
If you don't speak Latin, that was wonder.
I took 2 years of Latin in college, but
okay.
You don't have to speak Latin. The priest speaks Latin, but there's a missal, and it's in the Latin and the English. You just read it. And the homily is in English, so the lesson from the priest is in English.
Okay.
It's the most beautiful. It's just my preference. I love it, love it. And here I am, Miss New Age, alien, abductee, married to an astrologer, switching to Catholicism, wearing a mantilla, on my knees with the incense and the Gregorian chant, and I am so happy. And I'm loving it. And I still love it, and I still go to mass, but I'm still not in a state of grace. So that's just how I am with Catholicism. I think it's the most beautiful religion. I think it's the closest to the truth about all this. And I respect the stories of the saints and the mystics, especially like that Diana Pasulka is uncovering and presenting.
I love Diana, yeah.
Original primary source documents that she has access to in the Vatican Library, which make their experiences sound very similar to what we're experiencing in the experiencer community, actually. So it's all coming together, actually, for me. But that's that. And I'm sticking to it.
So when it comes to my lapse, people have questions. Melinda Leslie, you know her.
Yeah.
When it comes to this, you have to ask yourself, have they made agreements? Are they running parallel operations? Are they complicit? Do you believe our government is a partner in this phenomenon or a puppet?
Oh, now that is the question. Are they being forced or tricked, or are they complicit in a totally aware way? I don't know.
My theory is that they know who's been abducted, or at least they track who's been abducted. Same thing with the cattle mutilations. And I've been told that a lot of cattle is because they had some kind of presence there, and they want to analyze, the skin, the organs. But when it comes to people, let's say you're abducted, and I know it, and I work for the government. Well, I send somebody, and this is told to me by Whitley Strieber. Then I send my guys dressed as gray aliens, and then they put the implants, or they abduct you, and you think you've been abducted again, because they can't come and tell you, Camille, come to our offices, because that would be disclosure. Exactly. We would be admitting that we are being visited by, I don't want to say extraterrestrial, it could be interdimensional, it could be whatever beyond the ice. Well, who knows? But we cannot admit it, because admitting it would say, guys, we cannot defend you in case they just decide one day to take over.
Exactly. That's what disclosure is really about. They want to keep the status quo. They don't want people to know the criminality behind the cover-up, and they don't want to admit that they have no control over it. And now it seems to be escalating to a point where it's on the aliens' timeline, or as I like to say, it's on God's timeline. And so it's going to hit the fan, and they need to manage it. So the disclosure seems to be escalating in a way that they can hopefully manage it. That's what I think is happening.
What does it mean to
become aware? We're all going to become aware for some reason. I don't know if it's an event, it's a consciousness interface. I don't know what it's going to be, but everyone's going to become aware, and they're going to have to deal with what comes next.
What does it mean to raise a child when both parents have been touched by something the world barely acknowledges?
Well, my son, who's 23 now, swears he's never had anything paranormal happen to him. He has been around me and UFO people. I've brought him to a few events like Contact in the Desert and things like that. He's met Chris Bledsoe. Chris Bledsoe actually touched his ankle when he had a broken ankle and asked his lady that he interacts with to help heal Aiden's ankle when it was broken. So he's aware of a lot, but he's not experiencing things on a conscious level. And the only time he ever did anything suspicious to me was when he was a toddler. He was like 2, when we still lived in Beverly Hills, right before we moved to Tucson. He walked over to my bookshelf when I was gone one day. It was a low bookshelf, and he pulled off my communion book, the little paperback with the big alien face on the cover, and he tore that cover off, and he ripped that alien face cover into like 8 pieces. And I came home to that on the floor. And I taped it back together, and I still have it on my shelf with all the taped.
Now, why would he do that?
I don't know. That was the only thing. So he may be having experiences that are on the down low right now, but, until he's ready or whatever for that to become part of his. All he cares about is cars and motorcycles.
Yeah.
So.
By the way, this is where we have to put a cliffhanger. When we come back, I remember this story you told me many, many years ago. In the 90s, I believe it was, you had a catering company in Beverly Hills. And you went to one of your mansions there, and it was the home of the director of Independence Day, Day After Tomorrow, 2012. And I'm talking about Roland Emmerich. And I want you to tell us what you saw, because that's a fascinating story. Also, the Bledsoe effect, because, the hidden architecture of Hollywood, most people will never see it. You have seen it. And the night you saw something appear over your own church. All these things I want you to tell us when we come back. I know you don't have a book yet, but you have a website where people can actually, I was impressed with your website where you actually say of your experiences, because you would think people, I don't even want to touch this subject because I'm not going to be what do you call it? The people who cast you, the casting companies are going to say, don't touch her. But you don't care. You just say it and you're doing just fine, right?
The way I think about it is it's trendy now and I don't care. I've always been out of the closet, so I may as well maximize it, actually. We can talk about that. Because why cover that up at this point? I mean, I'm a good person. I've never been arrested. I've never been a drug addict, never been in rehab. I've never been divorced. I don't even have tattoos. And I show up for work and I know my lines. So if they have a problem with aliens, then they're stupid.
I appreciate and respect that a lot. Now, your website?
Yes.
Your website is CamilleJamesHarman.com, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, folks, don't go anywhere. We have one more hour with Camille. And in a few weeks, we'll have Jeff come here to open the year. And in case you wonder, folks, why do I sound like this? I hardly ever talk about my personal life. But the last time I was sick was in 2010, and I remember I had scheduled an interview with Niara Isley, and I had to go to the emergency room with pericarditis. And this is not COVID time, this is 2010. That's the only time when I had some kind of illness. But about 5 weeks ago, I was observing the skies here in Arizona, nothing. And a few days before the government shutdown happened, they started spraying again, which confirmed to me that these planes are not getting funded by the government. There's something else. But in one of those days, I was just walking around my neighborhood, and they were just spraying and spraying. That night, I felt something enter my body. And for the past 5 weeks, I've been fighting this long issue, which I'm told was the same that Robert David Steele and Jim Nichols had. And I personally told them, do not go to the hospital. They never came out alive. But I've been throwing everything at this. It's a slow process, and I believe I'm turning the corner. I'm getting just fine. So in case you wonder, why do I sound different? This is why. But anyway, one more hour to come with our guest, Camille Harman. This is Mel, and you are listening to VERITAS. Don't go anywhere. Here's a track from Truth Frequency. You won't hear anywhere else. If you like what you hear, you can get the full track at veritas7.com. on the page for today's guest.
Landed in LA with stars in my eyes, but the stars above were moving in lines. A fracture opened in my mind. What I saw, no film could define.
They told me it's nothing, just forget. But the silence screamed inside my head. I was gone and skin marked red. This was more than fear or dread. Between the light and the light, where angels wear masks and watches fly. The body floats but the soul won't hide. I'm not alone, I've seen both sides. Between the light and the light and the light.
Clinical hands in the dark of night. Beings of light and others not quite. Military men in shadowed halls. Whispers under checkerboard walls.
Underground where memory breaks. Screened by dreams, the real thing shakes. Regression tears the veil apart. What's buried deep becomes a start. Between the light and the light, where faith collides and truths defy. I saw the face behind the sky. A puppet string, a hidden eye. Between the light and the light, they know. They show, but never tell. Crop circles like coded scars. Masonic rooms behind movie stars. Confession in a churchyard glare. They followed me, even there. Told me it's demons, not divine. But I know the shape of the design. Faith and fear, they intertwine. Still of time. Between the light and the light, where actors play and prophets cry. The camera rolls, the soul replies. This is the truth they can't deny. Between the light and the light. It never stopped. Between the light and the light.
Thank you for listening to the first part of this important Veritas episode. To hear the rest and access all of our exclusive content, head over to the Veritas Plus member section or click the subscribe button at veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the Veritas store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at veritas7.com. Thank you for listening to Veritas, because you don't want to believe, you want to know.